Alright, the video you should be observing today is called a jig saw and the reciprocating saw, both of which are also called oftentimes sabre saws. We talked about that a little bit in class already. If we've had the class, if we have not, we will discuss it tomorrow. But each one of these uses essentially a cutting motion through wood or through other materials. And this cutting motion is not unlike a saber, where you would hack through it with a knife or perhaps go through it with a serrated edge, instead of having like a circular saw cutting through it with a rotor extended off of a motor. So that's how these are a little bit different, and that's how they can do some different things for us. A jigsaw. There's one. We have one of those in a Bosch form. We also have a couple DeWalt's, including one of which that is a cordless drill. And these are very lightweight. These are very portable. These are very nice for on the job site. A lot of times curves are needed to be able to be cut. These are able to do those curves as well as get to hard to reach places. Some of the things that we have to cut are all too far away for our circular saw and its wide base and its wide motor. Instead, you can use this saw and it can get into difficult spots. There's a lot of different blades that you can use. You just have to be able to have them on hand at the time. The ones that are going to be used for skull sawing have a very not wide blade, or else thin blade that way. You can also get ones that are just knives. Those cut through things like ceiling tiles. You can also get ones that are just straight down cuts. Some of them cut upward, and the different parts of the cuts are actually made right here. If you take a look on the side of the saw, of the jigsaw, you will find one of these adjustments, and that kind of shows how exactly the cutting is going to happen. If it's just straight up and down, where it'll run the blade itself straight up and down here, or if it will give a little bit of a motion to it so it cuts through, up and under, or else down and then out. So a lot of times it'll come up and under for an upward cut. Now, there's a lot of safety things I have to make sure that you know, and that's what part of this is too. First of all, make sure you're using the right blade for the job. Change outs for blades are very, very quick. When you are changing them out, make sure you disconnect the power to make adjustments. Place the base of the saw then firmly on the stock before cutting it. If you need some sort of bevel cut, make sure that you set that for a bevel cut. Turn on the motor before the blade contacts the stock, just like any other saw. You don't want to start with the material in between the blades of any saw. Obviously also the jigsaw. So make sure it starts before you dive into the material. Let's get rid of a lot more tear out. Don't try really sharp curves. You can always come back into the material just like a band saw, and you can cut again after you've cut a section off to kind of recreate those difficult curves. Make sure the work is well supported. Last thing you want is to be pressing down very hard and then for something underneath you to collapse. And then finally, this is not definitely much worse than a circular saw for tearing into sawhorses, because the bottom of it punches down, and as it does, if it punches down into something that it can't cut all the way through, it's going to punch down and actually maybe hop right up out of your hands. And what happens then is that it bends your blade, very not good for the workpiece, and it ends up puncturing maybe the top of your workpiece. Those are general jigsaw safety rules. There are two main types of shanks for your jigsaws, the first of which is the one that we have, the T-shank jigsaw blade. I have one at home that uses the U-shank jigsaw blade. Each one is just perfectly fine, but you just need to make sure that you purchase the right kind for your particular jigsaw. The second kind of saw we're looking at today is the reciprocating saw that does generally the same motion as a jigsaw, only it's just beefed up a little bit, like jigsaw on roids. This one is called not just reciprocating saw, it's given kind of a trade name, Sawzall, which is a Milwaukee brand trade name. This also can cut curves. It also is very, very good when circular saws are impractical, unsafe, or when you need to cut something up above something else that's a lot harder to reach than a circular saw can make it. Remember, the circular saw is kind of bulky. It's got the motor on the side, it's got the great big plate. You need a lot of room. This can just sneak into places, and actually there's some that have right angle reciprocating saws, which are very, very convenient as well. Often it can be used to this is how it's used in general, a lot of deconstruction, removing sections of framing, sheathing, entire walls. You can just chop through an entire wall here. That's why it's called a Sawzall. Blades are available to cut a wide variety of materials as well. Things for reciprocating saw. This is a relatively dangerous saw, so you have to be very careful with it. It does take practice to get used to as well, or this one also will jump off of material because you are not sure how to use it. First of all, make sure that the length is correct for your work. I'll talk to you about that if I have not already done so, how the length of the blade, not to go too deep. Also, if you have it anywhere too short and it does its reciprocating motion in and out of that front, if it ends up punching something instead of cutting through the side of it, that's going to end up with a very bad mar on your material, and also your blade might bend. Secondly, disconnect power or also take off the battery to change or make adjustments. This is one of my favorite saws to get with the battery operation because it is not going to get in your way. Then the cord is not something you have to mess with. As well as when you're reaching way up high for something that you're going to cut, you don't have a cord as one more thing weighing your arm down. This reciprocating saw is heavy enough. Place the base of the saw firmly in the stock before you cut it. That means that small angle, you'll see the piece of metal on the front that has to be touching something when you begin cutting through a piece of material. If it is not, it's going to bounce around. Turn the motor before, of course, blade contacts like any other saw. Don't try cutting really sharp curves. That's not what this can do. Again, you can come back and cut and make adjustments after you make your first cut. Make sure all your work is well supported. Make sure your wall is supported well. If you are sawzalling straight through the top studs of a wall, make sure that you have something to support it once you make that final cut. Firm stance is also important for this. This is a powerful saw. You need to be able to have the right hand position and right foot position as well. And finally, don't cut into your supports such as saw or load-bearing studs. That would be bad. Here you can see a wide variety of different blades for different things. This would be a ripping saw, very fast cut through wood with a lot of tear out, a little bit slower cut through wood. Here's a metal blade. I can tell by the very fine teeth there. This is essentially the same thing as this one, only shorter, for when you're going through 2x4s, let's say, instead of lengthwise, you're going through the through the width of them. And another metal cutting blade, and here's one over here that'd be more of a scroll cutting blade. So all in all, there is your PowerPoint and your information on reciprocating saws and jig saws, often called saber saws. One last thing to finish up this activity, please go to the discussion, the post-discussion, or the post-lecture response on the discussion forum that follows right up after this saber saw demonstration. You'll be asked to just respond in a couple sentences to let me know that you did view this video so that I know exactly who all did this and who did not. Thank you very much, and God's blessings.